Greetings to all esteemed English-speaking auditory who is listening to us, who watch this video. My name is Vasyl Pekhno. I'm a Ukrainian journalist who has been covering the battlefield situation in Ukraine for more than 3 years of full-scale invasion. Actually, throughout the whole period of time of the full-scale invasion here in Ukraine. So I present you battlefield map reviews, updates, everyday update. So today I present the latest map situation as of Saturday, June 14. Please join to the viewing of this video with your likes, with your shares of this video, comment below this video product, and also subscribe to our YouTube channel. So let's begin, but not with Ukraine. I really understand that Iran and Israel are at war right now, and this undoubtedly is the event number one, the number one topic in the world right now. But here in Ukraine, our war is on its peak. Because Russians are pushing very hard. And naturally, I will be covering its events first and foremost, I mean Ukrainian ones. But for the very beginning, I will start really with Israeli and Iranian news, which greatly affects Ukraine as well. We all understand that. So let's start with this part of review. Take a look at the photo. This in the photo is reportedly the commander of the aerospace division of Iran's aerospace forces, Brigadier General Amir Ali Hajizadeh. Official Israeli sources reported that he was eliminated during one of the raids, missile attacks on the high command of the Iranian army. It is also known that the chief of the general staff was killed there, as well as the commander of the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And this man was also killed, the commander of the aerospace forces, Hajizadeh, Amir Ali Hajizadeh. He is primarily known for what and why is this important for us? Because he was under Western sanctions due to the fact that he is responsible, or rather he is the one in charge for supplying Iranian Shahed-type drones to Russia, and they're used in the war against Ukraine. So this is the person who, on behalf of Iran, established the process of transferring both the technology and the Shahed drones themselves, and continued to organize and maintain the process of transferring Shahed drones from Iran to Russia, because Russia, yes, it is now producing its own prototypes of Shaheds, Jirans, decoy drones, and other types of drones based on Iranian blueprints, but Russia does not produce or supply the full volume that allows it to carry out such massive attacks as they do almost every night. Accordingly, in order to accumulate the resources needed to launch attacks with 400 or 500 Shaheeds, the Russians have continued and still continue to buy them from Iran. And this brigadier general was precisely the one responsible for this logistics. I really hope that his death will worsen the logistics of Shaheeds from Iran to Russia. Moreover, this general was involved in the downing. I'd like to remind you of such a tragic event in our history in 2020. Near Tehran, a Ukrainian plane, a UIA Ukraine International Airlines, Boeing 737 crashed near Tehran as a result of being shot down by Iranian air defense. There were 176 people on board. All of them died. I'm simply reminding you of this tragic event. And it was precisely General Amir Ali Hajizadeh who was one of those convincing the entire international community that the plane crashed due to technical reasons, pilot error, and so on. However, later on, it was he who, under obvious circumstances, had to admit the responsibility of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps for the plane crash, because the air defense systems mistakenly identified the plane as a missile. And now this person has been eliminated by the Israelis. This is something that should be mentioned right from the very beginning in the context of reviewing the map and the interdependence between Israel and Iran and their war with each other. So friends, subscribe to us. Let me remind you of this once again. Write your comments and like the video. Let's move on. Another piece of news coming from Russia is that yesterday, a Russian military aviation public page, fighter bomber, reported that an enemy Su-25 attack aircraft had crashed. The pilot was rescued, everything is fine, it says, but the most interesting part is how it crashed. According to my information, this happened in Donetsk direction near Selidov. And there is even a video on social media. I suggest we watch this video to understand what exactly happened to it. A very brief spoiler, a pair of Russian Sukhoi jets was flying, one in front, one behind, and the one in front went down. This happened after the plane behind fired a shot. Here are the main details you should pay attention to. A hint. It seems that the clumsiness of the pilot flying behind led to his missiles, launched from the attack aircraft, striking the Sukhoi jet that was flying in front. And that's how this air crash happened. Now watch the video carefully.
Softly crackling radio sounds.
So maybe it's even worth including a video with there's sound here. So on the punishment, it just starts to go into a spin and falls down. Basically, it's destroyed as a result of which falls off. So it's very pleasing that the Russians, out of panic, have started shooting down their own Sukhoi jets. It's also very pleasing that they have a lot of similar technical malfunctions with their aircraft, even deep in the rear. Recently, a helicopter crashed. And here I want to point out a specific detail that almost no one, well, very few people are highlighting, because about a month and a half or two ago, Ukraine carried out drone strikes on various aircraft repair plants. Vyryeva, the aircraft plant in Kazan, which produces Tu planes. And somehow, well, everyone was saying, well, drones, well, they flew over some administrative building. So what kind of damage did they cause? But this, friends, this is exactly the damage. Lost technical documentation, most likely. And now the Russians are having problems repairing their aircraft. That's what this is all about. Nothing happens for no reason. Everything is interconnected. If we had the same resources as Israel, we would probably have carried out a single missile and bomb strike that would have destroyed, just like in the case with Iran, the targets, wiped out the command, destroyed the nuclear facilities, taken out the air defense bases, and so on. Unfortunately, we don't have those kinds of resources. And Russia is much bigger than Iran. Well, and Israel has been at war much longer than we have. But we are doing everything within our power. And there is a clear logic to the events happening in the rear with their projection, so to speak, onto the front. And now, friends, let's talk about the front. Where should I start? Actually, as I mentioned, that enemy Su aircraft was destroyed by friendly fire, according to my information, in the area of Selidov. That's in the Pokrovsk direction. Pokrovsk, and here is Selidov, just to remind you. The situation in the Pokrovsk direction remains quite difficult at the moment. The main focus of the fighting has shifted toward the borders of the Dnipropetrovsk region. In other words, the enemy is pushing in this direction. Our brigades holding the line here are simply doing a fantastic job. The enemy is still not being allowed to cross the borders of Donetsk region. No matter how much the Russians claim in the daily reports that they've already entered the Dnipropetrovsk region. Yesterday, the New York Times wrote they've already entered the Dnipropetrovsk region. In reality, this information, well, it's not that it doesn't correspond to the truth at all. Russian groups are constantly entering the Dnipropetrovsk region, constantly, friends. But at the same time, our soldiers are destroying them in quite large numbers, not allowing them to gather or to push through and break a more serious line of defense in this direction. However, the Russians are constantly, let's say, advancing, because even if we talk about Kotlyarivka, specifically in this Pokrovsk direction, there is information that recently there has been some progress. It's the same story in Orikov. I think that as soon as next week, we will see changes on the map where the Russians have expanded their gray zone from the border of Donetsk region into the Dnipropetrovsk region. At the same time, there is information that in Novosergivka and Novomykolaivka, the enemy has been held back, and here they are not advancing toward these borders. But undoubtedly, they will reach Dnipropetrovsk region sooner or later. Just like these assault troops try to break through in the next video, which I will show you on the screen, friends. This video is from the 71 Mechanized Brigade, from the soldiers, my comrades, who sent me this footage. So I'm showing it to you now. It is published on my Telegram channel. You can go there, watch it, and generally keep up with the news from my Telegram channel. There is a link to it in the description of this video. So what is this? It's a river. And I don't know whether the Russian assault troops wanted to swim across it to move further into the Dnipropetrovsk region, or if they just wanted to take a dip because they were sitting right in the swamp and wanted to wash the mud off themselves. But the point is that, let me rewind, so they run in. It's a sped up video, of course. The Russians run into the river. It slows down a bit, but that's not a big deal. And then an artillery shell hits them. It seems to me that was artillery that hit them with shrapnel scattering well. It's not a cluster shell, but a regular shell. But in short, they opened the swimming season. And as they say, friends, the way they opened it is the way they closed it. All of this happened in a body of water near Kotlyarivka. You can see this body of water very clearly right here. Here it is. The soldiers of the 71 Brigade are controlling this section of the front and are doing everything they can to prevent the enemy from advancing further. Besides that, the situation is, without a doubt, difficult, extremely difficult. The situation is difficult, and it has become even more complicated recently, actually, starting back in Lyman, because in the directions of Torsk and Zarychne, in these locations, the soldiers of the 63rd Brigade have already shown videos of how they regularly capture Russians in the rear, though admittedly behind our own lines. This indicates that our positions as such and the front line in general are not stable. With all due respect to all the open source intelligence projects, I'm telling my colleagues now that, well, this kind of a stable front line simply does not exist. That here is the red line, and that's it. It lies exactly here. No, there is no such thing. Here is the enemy's red line. Here is our blue line. There is no clear line of contact. And in reality, in the forests near Lyman, in the Serbianske forestry, these 60ers sometimes, and not only the 60ers, in general, units here are taking enemy positions in the rear of our lines. This precisely indicates that the defensive line does not have clear boundaries, the fact that the enemy gets in there. But how does something like that even happen? What does a typical green zone even look like? Let me try to explain it to you. Imagine a typical green zone, a tree line. There are some consolidated strong points in it. And in those, there are some dugouts, observation posts of our troops. There's bad weather when fog can settle in when it rains. Right now, it's exactly that kind of rainy period across Ukraine. It can be windy, and not just because of poor visibility, but also because of the wind itself. Our reconnaissance drones, which are supposed to be hovering 24/7, providing visuals, situational awareness, and transmitting it to headquarters so that the headquarters can use the radio to inform our soldiers at these observation posts, at these strong points, that, for example, the enemy is advancing over there in a group, say, about 10 people. Let's imagine that this drone can't take off. That's it, it's gone. There's no reconnaissance. What should we do in such conditions? And also using the greenery as cover, the Russians advance either on foot or they use some kind of anti-drone cloaks for cover, or they move quickly on buggies and motorcycles, rushing into these tree lines where our positions are. Our guys might not even realize that they're in this tree line. And yes, unfortunately, situations like this happen where they get behind our lines, capture our soldiers, and then something happens to them. We understand all of this perfectly well. Well, or if, for example, it was possible to re-establish, let's say, contact with the headquarters, or if the soldiers themselves at the positions had night vision devices, for instance, or other equipment that allows them to detect the enemy. So then, friends, what happens in that case? What happens is that the enemy is taken prisoner, and in other cases, trouble occurs. And this kind of open access on the front line actually happens because there are no static lines, no static positions, and drones are extremely widely used in combat engagements. This kind of open access exists on absolutely all sections of the front. It's not just Lyman. Probably the most illustrative example in this regard is Kurakhove and this stretch of the front, because here the enemy, well, you can see these wide gray zones which primarily stretch along the ravines and wooded areas, whether in the direction of Odryadny Bohatir, Komaria, or Fedorivka. So everywhere the enemy is basically advancing through the tree lines and moving about, but efforts are being made to prevent them from roaming freely. That is, they infiltrate the rear, and as soon as they are detected, they are immediately destroyed again and again.
Every voice matters. Join our community, support independent journalism, and help us bring you the truth from Ukraine. Become a member of Ukraine Today. Join us now.
In other words, they rush in, waving the aquafresh, they keep running in. But in reality, there is absolutely no clear understanding that, for example, they actually control any particular settlement. To be fair, if we are being honest, that understanding really doesn't exist here. But the fact that they're wandering around like that, so to speak, along the front line, that's true. And this isn't happening only in the Kurakhove direction, although right now, in this sense, the Kurakhove and Novopavlivka directions are probably among the most difficult. Besides this, the Russians are also putting pressure in the Zaporizhzhia region. There have been changes on deep state in the area of the settlement of Malynivka. Here, over the past 2 weeks, the enemy has been constantly attacking, trying to gain some advantages for themselves. And what's notable is that I actually get the impression that in Zaporizhzhia, there's this kind of time frame when something is supposed to start. Something is supposed to start. Our fighters are doing everything they can to prevent this something from happening, not letting it happen. A very large number of aircraft are operating in this direction. Here's a video from yesterday. The Air Force posted it on their page, showing them striking 2 buildings with 2 guided aerial bombs. The first building is a command post for UAV operators. The second building is an enemy ammunition depot. And these are super precise munitions that our partners have supplied us with. Most likely, GBU-29 or GBU-39 were used here. They have exceptionally high accuracy because they contain a relatively small amount of explosive, obviously. The GBU, I think, is about 90 kilograms. These are not JDAMs. Well, maybe they are JDAMs. Listen, those have about 250 kilograms of explosives. So the first strike hit the positions of the UAV operators, and the second targeted the enemy's ammunition depot. By the way, I don't rule out that the same video showing the strike on the enemy's depot was captured in footage shot by aerial reconnaissance operators from the 110th Territorial Defense Brigade, who are also operating in the Zaporizhzhia direction. Here's a clip of the video, take a look, it's from them. They are showing the enemy's depot. Honestly, those buildings where the occupiers were hiding look very, very similar in terms of architecture. And there are actually many such operations carried out by our aviation in the Zaporizhzhia region. And if you add to this the sabotage on the railways, what they call the railway war, Yakimivka, Melitopol, what else did we have there? The destruction of fuel trucks, the destruction thanks to FPV drones of equipment being transported in the south. All of this is being done to prevent extremely difficult scenarios from unfolding in Zaporizhzhia. Although I understand that, as they say, you can sense it in the air, there's a very difficult situation there. And these advances in Malynivka, this probing of the front line here, it all just marks the beginning of more active combat operations. Although in reality, it was actually from the Dnipro group of forces, specifically from the south, that there was information throughout this week. We are summing up the week. After all, that this week there was information that the Russians were redirecting certain resources here to the Kursk and Sumy regions. There were videos of large-scale movements of columns. Well, but what does large-scale even mean? They wrote about 10 self-propelled artillery units, saying that this is an unprecedentedly large number. Just think about it. In the fourth year of the full-scale invasion, an unprecedentedly large number is considered to be 10 self-propelled artillery units. But okay, yes, it really is unprecedented for the present day. They were transferring these self-propelled artillery units here to the Sumy region from the southern direction, along with personnel, trains with equipment to reinforce the Sumy grouping. Why? I even pointed incorrectly. I pointed to the north of the Kharkiv region. Here is Sumy region. Why were they transferring them to the Sumy region? Well, because here, as I mentioned yesterday, quoting the president, I think you probably read a lot of Ukrainian military channels yesterday that claim this. There really are a lot of good news stories now about our soldiers pushing back the enemy occupiers in some areas. I don't share in excessive euphoria or excitement about our counterattacks. There are local successes. There are undoubtedly some, but overall the situation remains tense. And if the enemy is transferring additional resources here, it means we should expect an escalation of hostilities in the near future in this area. In other words, for now, the enemy is unable to achieve its goal, even in this direction, of creating a demilitarized and buffer zone. And they need more resources to do so. And I'll say a few more words about the Kharkiv region, because yesterday some information about Dvorochna might have caused some confusion. In reality, a rather sizable bridgehead has already been established in Dvorochna on the right bank of the Oskar River. And again, this is a bit about how information is perceived. People think that this happened literally in a matter of days or even hours. In reality, that's not the case. This is the result, as I've already mentioned, of several months, almost half a year, during which the Russians were establishing this bridgehead here. Now they have it set up, but for now it's without equipment. They still haven't managed to move equipment here to Dvorochna, but the bridgehead is already taking shape. It's quite sizable, but it needs to be kept under fire control as much as possible. And it's the soldiers of the 10th Mountain Assault Battalion who are working on Dvorochna as best they can. Yesterday, they showed a video from Dvorochna where the enemy is gathering. Right now, they are present only in terms of personnel because, as I've said before, they haven't moved heavy equipment to Kharkiv yet. Likewise, according to my information, heavy equipment hasn't appeared in the Sumy region either, at least not yet. So regarding this enemy personnel in Dvorochna, dozens of them are being engaged by the 10th Mountain Assault Well. I said battalion, but actually, it's the brigade unit of the battalions of the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade is working against them. If I'm not mistaken, it's not the 108th, but another battalion, in short. Let me clarify exactly which battalion of the 10th Mountain Assault Brigade it is. They are operating here, destroying the enemy and preventing them from advancing further. It seems it's the 8th, right? The 8th, yes, the Wolves. Wolves is the 8th separate Mountain Assault Battalion of the 110th Brigade from the city of Chernivtsi. And now, near Dvorochna, they are operating, not allowing the enemy to advance. Oh Lord, I must be as blind as a bat. Look, it says 8th GHB in huge letters. And I was wondering which battalion from the 10th is operating here in this direction. In short, the situation is really difficult, very difficult, possibly the most difficult it's been on the front in the last year and a half to 2 years. But on the other hand, there are reasons to believe that there are ways to keep the situation under control. Fixing it probably won't be possible for now, but it can be held. And honestly, Sumy region, in my opinion, is not a catastrophic case. On the contrary, it's actually a rather successful example of holding the defense, since the Russians are unable and incapable of achieving their objective. But Donbass remains the #1 target. Right now, it's very hard for our guys. Support them, friends. Support them. Thank you for your attention. Take care of yourselves. All the best, and until we meet again.